The fluorescent lights of Omnicorp's sprawling headquarters hummed a monotonous song, a soundtrack to Elias Vance's solitary nights. By day, these corridors teemed with ambition and the clatter of keyboards. By night, they were his domain. Elias, a man whose quiet demeanor blended seamlessly with the shadows, moved with a practiced efficiency, his cleaning cart a familiar, rhythmic presence in the deserted office landscape. He was, to most of Omnicorp's daytime inhabitants, just the janitor, a fixture as unremarkable as the water coolers or the potted plants. Few, if any, knew that behind his unassuming exterior lay a mind vibrant with the cadence of 9 different languages. Elias found a strange comfort in the hushed emptiness. It was here, amidst the lingering scent of industrial cleaner and discarded coffee cups, that he could let his thoughts roam free, often murmuring phrases in German, then switching to Mandarin, or tracing Cyrillic letters on a dusty surface with a damp cloth. He'd picked up languages like other people collected, stamps, a passion ignited in his youth by a tattered multilingual dictionary found in a second-hand bookstore. Each new tongue was a new world, a new way of seeing. His current role, however, offered little use for such skills, and he kept them carefully concealed, private treasure in a world that often valued only the most visible of assets. He was diligent, meticulous. Desks were wiped clean, bins emptied, carpets vacuumed to pristine condition. But he also observed. He saw the stress etched on young executives' faces, the careless arrogance of some mid-level managers, the genuine kindness of a few scattered souls. Mr. Marcus Thorne, head of operations, fell squarely into the arrogant category. Thorne, a man whose tailored suits seemed perpetually a size too tight for his bluster, rarely acknowledged Elias with more than a curt, dismissive nod. If that, on the rare occasions Thorne did speak to him, it was usually to point out a perceived failing, a speck of dust missed, a trash can not emptied precisely on schedule. Elias absorbed these small indignities with a quiet resilience, his moral compass steady. His work was honest, and he performed it with unwavering integrity. Tonight, like many nights, Elias was working his way through the executive wing on the 40th floor. The offices here were larger, the carpets plusher, the views more spectacular. Most were dark, but a sliver of light escaped from under the door of the CEO's office, Ms. Evelyn Reed. Elias knew she often worked late. He respected her. He'd seen her interact with staff at all levels with a directness and courtesy that Thorne sorely lacked. As he neared her office, voices, sharp and agitated, sliced through the usual nighttime quiet. It was a video conference, the unmistakable digital echo confirming it. Elias paused his cart, not wanting to disturb her with the rattle of his tools. The language being spoken was Hungarian, a tongue he'd spent 2 years mastering, fascinated by its unique structure. He could hear Ms. Reed's voice, tense and strained, speaking English, then another voice, clearly a translator, attempting to bridge the linguistic gap with the Hungarian counterparts. Elias frowned. The translator was struggling badly. Key financial terms were being fumbled, nuances lost, resulting in what sounded like confusion and growing irritation from the Hungarian side. The projected ROI, the translator said in stilted Hungarian, good, very good money. Elias winced. The actual term should have conveyed a complex forecast of return on investment, not a vague promise of good money. He heard the Hungarian voices become sharper, their questions more pointed. This wasn't just a casual chat. It sounded like a high-stakes negotiation, and it was derailing fast. "Their concerns are about the timeline, Ms. Reed," the translator interjected, clearly flustered. But Elias, listening intently, knew that wasn't the primary concern being voiced. The Hungarians were questioning the core valuation model, a detail the translator seemed to have missed entirely. The deal, whatever it was clearly vital. Ms. Reed's tone grew increasingly frustrated. Elias felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his own stomach. He knew the correct phrases, the precise terminology that could clarify the misunderstandings. It was like watching someone try to unlock a complex safe with the wrong key. Without thinking, driven purely by the instinct to correct a critical error he so clearly perceived, Elias muttered the accurate Hungarian phrasing for the valuation concerns and the appropriate, respectful way to address them, his voice barely above a whisper. He was outside, a few feet from the slightly ajar door, shielded by a large decorative plant. He hadn't meant for anyone to hear. Inside the office, Ms. Reed, on the verge of ending the call in exasperation, suddenly went still. In a brief lull, as the Hungarians paused, expecting a coherent response, a faint but clear voice, speaking perfect, nuanced Hungarian, had drifted into the room. It had addressed the exact point of their contention with an elegance and precision her own translator hadn't come close to achieving. For a moment, she thought it was a ghost in the machine, a glitch in the connection. But the voice had been too close, too real. The investors on the other end fell silent, a new note of interest in their digital stillness. The miscommunication had been about to scuttle a $50 million partnership, a deal Omnicorp desperately needed. Now, an unexpected, almost ethereal intervention had changed the air. Elias, oblivious to the impact his quiet words had just made, began to slowly push his cart forward, assuming the moment had passed. Ms. Evelyn Reed ended the disastrous video call with a curt apology to the Hungarian investors, promising to reconvene shortly with clearer information. Her mind, however, wasn't on the jeopardized deal as much as it was on the voice. It had been clear, concise, and undeniably accurate. Her own translator, a highly paid consultant from a supposedly reputable agency, was now stammering excuses, but she waved him into silence. "Just wait outside, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice tight with a mixture of frustration and a burgeoning, almost unbelievable hope. As Henderson scurried out, she rose from her large leather chair and walked purposefully to the door, pulling it open wider. There, caught in the sudden brightness spilling from her office, was Elias Vance, the night janitor. He was bent over his cart, adjusting a spray bottle, and he looked up, startled, his expression a mixture of surprise and apprehension, like a nocturnal creature caught in an unexpected beam of light. "Mr. Vance?" Ms. Reed asked, her gaze sharp and questioning. "Were you just outside my office?" Elias straightened, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Yes, Ms. Reed. I was just cleaning the corridor." He gestured vaguely with a cloth in his hand, his eyes avoiding hers. He looked as if he expected a reprimand for loitering or eavesdropping. "Did you hear any part of my conversation?" she pressed, keeping her tone neutral, though her heart was pounding with a strange premonition. Elias hesitated. He was a man who valued honesty, but the situation was so bizarre he hardly knew what to say. I couldn't help but overhear some of it, ma'am." The door was slightly open. "I apologize if I was a distraction." "The language," Ms. Reed said, stepping closer. The Hungarian. Was that you I heard speaking it? Elias's eyes finally met hers, wide with a dawning understanding of her question. He looked trapped. He could deny it, of course. Who would believe the janitor was fluent in complex Hungarian business vernacular? But looking at Ms. Reed's intent face, he felt a compulsion to tell the truth. Yes, ma'am, he admitted quietly. I know some Hungarian. Some. Ms. Reed raised an eyebrow. What I heard sounded like more than some. Mr. Henderson, my professional translator, was mangling it. You, on the other hand, seem to understand precisely what their concern was about the valuation model. Elias flushed slightly. I've studied languages for many years, Ms. Reed. It's of a hobby. A hobby? Ms. Reed almost laughed, the absurdity of it striking her. Here she was, about to lose a critical deal due to linguistic incompetence, while the man who cleaned her floors possessed the very skill she desperately needed. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice now carrying a sense of urgency. That deal is worth $50 million to this company. The investors are about to walk because they believe we are either incompetent or trying to deceive them, thanks to Mr. Henderson's efforts. She gestured dismissively towards the outer office where the disgraced translator presumably waited. I need someone who can speak their language, understand their nuances, and convey our position accurately. Right now. She paused, studying his face. He looked terrified, but also intelligent and, she sensed, capable. What Ms. Reed didn't realize was the sheer depth of Elias's linguistic repertoire, nor the strength of the integrity that underpinned his quiet existence. Mr. Vance, she said, making a decision that would have seemed insane to her just 10 minutes prior. I need you to come into my office. I'm going to reconvene that call in 5 minutes. I want you to translate for me. Elias's jaw practically dropped. Ma'am, me? But I'm the janitor. I don't have security clearance for such things. My supervisor, Mr. Thorne. Your supervisor works for me, Ms. Reed stated firmly, a hint of steel in her voice. And right now, the only clearance I care about is whether you can help this company. I'll offer you a $1,000 bonus. Right now, cash from my purse if you prefer, if you can help me salvage this call. More if the deal goes through because of your assistance. Elias was stunned into silence. $1,000 was more than a week's pay, but it wasn't just the money. It was the sudden, shocking vote of confidence from the CEO herself. It was the opportunity to use a part of himself he had kept hidden for so long, to do something that truly mattered on a grand scale. Fear warred with a nascent excitement. He thought of Mr. Thorne, of the ridicule he might face if this went poorly, of the sheer audacity of the request. But then he thought of the garbled translations of the investor's genuine concerns going unheard. I don't have a suit, he said, looking down at his simple work uniform. It was the only objection his stunned mind could muster. Ms. Reed actually smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed her face. My late husband was about your build. I keep a spare suit of his in my closet here for emergencies. This, Mr. Vance, qualifies as an emergency. She turned. Come on, we don't have much time. Elias, feeling as though he'd stepped into an alternate reality, hesitated for only a second more. Then, with a deep breath that barely calmed the frantic thumping in his chest, he nodded. Okay, Miss Reed. I'll do my best. What Miss Reed didn't fully realize was the hornet's nest she was about to stir within her own management by elevating a janitor, however talented, to such a visible and critical role, and Elias had no idea that this single, reluctant step into the spotlight was about to change not only his life, but the very fabric of Omnicorp. 5 minutes later, Elias Vance sat beside Ms. Evelyn Reed at her expansive mahogany desk, feeling utterly surreal. He was wearing a dark, impeccably tailored suit that had belonged to the CEO's late husband. It was a little loose in the shoulders, but a world away from his janitorial uniform. Mr. Henderson, the original translator, had been curtly dismissed, his face a mask of disbelief and indignation. The video call screen flickered back to life, displaying the faces of the Hungarian investors, their expressions initially wary and skeptical. Ms. Reed made a brief, polite introduction. "Gentlemen, we experienced some technical difficulties with our previous translation feed. I'd like to introduce Mr. Elias Vance, who will be assisting us moving forward to ensure clarity." She offered no further explanation of Elias's usual role, a deliberate omission that Elias appreciated. Then the questions began anew. The lead Hungarian investor, a stern-faced man named Mr. Nagy, picked up exactly where he had left off, his tone sharp as he reiterated his concerns about the valuation methodology, this time with an added layer of impatience. Elias listened intently, his earlier nervousness receding as his linguistic faculties took over. When Mr. Nagy paused, Elias leaned into the microphone. In fluent, respectful Hungarian, he began to speak. He didn't just translate Ms. Reed's previous points, he subtly reframed them, using culturally specific idioms and a level of technical financial vocabulary that demonstrated a profound understanding of their concerns. He acknowledged the validity of their questions before presenting Omnicorp's counterpoints, his voice calm and assured. The change in the investors' demeanor was palpable. Their eyes widened slightly. They exchanged surprised glances. Mr. Nagy, who had been leaning back with his arms crossed, slowly leaned forward, his expression shifting from skepticism to intrigued attention. Elias continued, flawlessly navigating complex clauses, clarifying ambiguities, and even injecting a touch of appropriate deference and humor where the previous translator had been flat and robotic. He wasn't just a conduit for words, he was a bridge between cultures. Ms. Reed watched, astounded. Elias spoke with an eloquence and confidence that belied his usual quiet presence. He was not just translating, he was actively facilitating understanding, anticipating follow-up questions, and smoothing over ruffled feathers from the earlier exchange. By the end of the hour-long call, the atmosphere had transformed. The tension had dissipated, replaced by a constructive dialogue. The deal, which had been on life support, was now tentatively back on track, pending final review. Mr. Nagy even offered a rare smile and a compliment on the exceptional clarity provided. When the call ended, Ms. Reed turned to Elias, her eyes shining with undisguised admiration and relief. "Elias," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "That was remarkable. You didn't just save the deal, you built a bridge." "I can't thank you enough." She immediately authorized the promised bonus and hinted at a more substantial reward if the deal was finalized. Elias felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling of accomplishment he hadn't experienced in years. "I was glad I could help Ms. Reed," he said, a shy smile touching his lips. News, however, travels fast in a corporate environment, especially news as unusual as this. By the next morning, whispers of the mystery translator, who had salvaged the massive Hungarian deal, were rippling through Omnicorp. And soon, the most astonishing detail emerged. The hero of the hour was Elias Vance, the night janitor. The reaction was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and in some quarters amusement. But for Mr. Marcus Thorne, head of operations, it was neither amusing nor shocking. It was infuriating. Thorne, whose department was indirectly responsible for vetting and hiring the incompetent Mr. Henderson, felt personally humiliated. He had long considered Elias a non-entity, a part of the building's infrastructure, rather than a person of any consequence. To see this same man suddenly lauded, even privately, by the CEO, was an affront to his sense of order, and more importantly, his authority. He saw Elias's sudden, bizarre elevation not as a stroke of luck for Omnicorp, but as an implicit criticism of his own management. Thorne couldn't openly challenge the CEO's decision. Not yet, but he could work to ensure this was a one-time fluke. He got lucky. Thorne scoffed to his sycophantic assistant Daniel, probably picked up a few phrases from a discarded newspaper. Reed was desperate. It's a fluke, and I'll make sure everyone knows it. Behind the scenes, Thorne was already plotting to ensure the janitor returned to his mops and buckets permanently. He began to subtly sow seeds of doubt. He'd casually mentioned to other managers how irregular the situation was, how unvetted. Elias was for such sensitive discussions. He instructed Daniel to casually inquire about Elias's background, looking for any shred of information that could be used to discredit him or paint him as an unqualified opportunist who had somehow tricked his way into the CEO's favor. What Thorne didn't realize was that Ms. Reed, deeply impressed and now intensely curious about her multilingual janitor, was already formulating her own plans for Elias Vance's plans that went far beyond a single translation job. The quiet janitor had become an unexpected catalyst, and the gears of change, once set in motion, were often hard to stop. Ms. Evelyn Reed was not a woman who believed in flukes, especially not ones that saved $50 million deals. Elias Vance's performance had been too polished, his understanding too deep. The day after the successful call, she summoned Elias to her office again, this time during daylight hours. Elias arrived, dressed in his own neat but simple clothes, looking slightly out of place amidst the daytime hustle of the executive floor. He was still processing the events of the previous night, the bonus safely tucked away, profound sense of unreality clinging to him. Elias, Ms. Reed began, motioning for him to sit. Your assistance was invaluable. It's clear you have an extraordinary talent, a hobby as you called it, that far surpasses what most people achieve with years of formal training. She paused. Frankly, it's a resource this company has been criminally underutilizing. She then outlined a proposal. I'd like to offer you a temporary special assignment, with a significant pay increase, of course. I want you to review some of our other recent multilingual communications and international contracts, a sort of translation and cultural accuracy quality review. You'll report directly to me. Elias was taken aback. This was more than just a thank you. It was a genuine opportunity. Ms. Reed, I don't have formal qualifications in contract law or international business beyond what I've read on my own. You have an exceptional mind for languages and, I suspect, an equally exceptional attention to detail. Ms. Reed countered. And you have integrity. That's what I need right now. Think of it as a 3-month probationary project. If it works out, we can discuss something more permanent. Hesitantly, Elias agreed. He was assigned a small, temporary office, a far cry from his janitorial closet, and given access to a range of documents that he would never have dreamed of seeing. He started with recent marketing materials translated into various languages, quickly identifying awkward phrasing and cultural missteps that were, at best, embarrassing and, at worst, potentially alienating to target markets. As he delved deeper, Ms. Reed expanded his scope to include draft agreements and correspondence with international vendors and partners. It was here, in the dry, precise language of contracts and financial statements, that Elias's unique skill set truly began to shine. His years of quiet observation in the corporate environment, coupled with his linguistic mastery, allowed him to see things others might miss. He wasn't just looking at words. He was looking for patterns, for discrepancies, for the subtle dissonances that often signaled underlying problems. One set of contracts, related to procurement and services within Mr. Marcus Thorne's operations department, particularly caught his attention. There were several long-term agreements with overseas suppliers, including the very translation agency that had employed the incompetent Mr. Henderson. Working late into the evenings, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of unease, Elias meticulously cross-referenced invoices with service agreements. His fluency in languages like German, Spanish, and Russian proving invaluable as he navigated original documentation that had often been poorly summarized in English. He began to notice a disturbing pattern. Inflated invoices that didn't quite match contracted rates. Vague service descriptions that allowed for overbilling. A consistent favoring of certain vendors, despite evidence of subpar performance, like the translation agency. The discrepancies were subtle, often hidden within complex clauses or spread across multiple small transactions, designed, it seemed, to evade casual scrutiny. But to Elias's focused mind, the pieces began to form a larger, uglier picture. He recalled Mr. Thorne's constant dismissiveness, his arrogance, his fury at Elias's unexpected moment in the spotlight. Initially, Elias had attributed it to simple prejudice and embarrassment. Now, a more sinister possibility began to emerge. Thorne wasn't just an incompetent manager trying to protect his reputation. He might be actively engaged in something far worse. Elias started documenting his findings with the same meticulous care he once applied to cleaning schedules. He compiled spreadsheets, highlighted suspicious clauses, and prepared summaries, ensuring every claim was backed by clear evidence from Omnicorp's own records. He felt a knot of dread. This was far beyond a simple quality review. He was uncovering potential corruption that seemed to go deep into Thorne's department. What Thorne didn't realize, as he continued his petty campaign to discredit Elias and reassure himself that the janitor issue would soon blow over, was that the quiet man he had so thoroughly underestimated was, at that very moment, meticulously untangling a web of deceit that led directly to his doorstep. Elias, driven by his innate integrity and the trust Ms. Reed had placed in him, knew he couldn't ignore what he was finding. The patterns in the silence were speaking volumes, and he was listening. He decided it was time to prepare a confidential report for Ms. Reed. Ms. Evelyn Reed reviewed Elias Vance's meticulously compiled report with a chenke-kendig sense of disbelief that quickly hardened into cold fury. The evidence was undeniable. Patterns of overcharges, kickbacks from preferred, underperforming vendors, including the translation agency Mr. Henderson hailed from, and a clear trail of financial misconduct that all pointed squarely at Mr. Marcus Thorne's operations department. The potential losses for Omnicorp ran into the millions. Elias, with his quiet diligence and linguistic prowess, had uncovered a rot that went far deeper than mere incompetence. Ms. Reed knew she had to act decisively. Thorne was not just an arrogant bully. He was a liability, actively harming the company he was supposed to serve. She summoned her legal counsel and the head of internal audit, sharing Elias's findings. Plans were quickly and discreetly put into motion. A week later, Ms. Reed called an emergency, high-level board meeting. Mr. Thorne was, of course, summoned. He arrived with his usual air of self-importance, slightly preening, assuming the meeting was perhaps to discuss the successful turnaround of the Hungarian deal, and he hoped to quietly sideline the janitor, who had briefly, annoyingly, stolen the limelight. He nodded curtly at Elias, who was already seated in the boardroom, a presence Thorne found irritatingly persistent. Elias, however, met his gaze calmly, a new, quiet confidence in his eyes. The meeting began, not with congratulations, but with Ms. Reed's grave announcement that serious irregularities had been discovered within the company. Thorne shifted uncomfortably in his expensive leather chair, a flicker of apprehension crossing his face. Over the past few weeks, Ms. Reed continued, her voice steady and firm, I tasked Mr. Elias Vance here with a special internal review of our multilingual communications and international vendor contracts. She gestured towards Elias. Some of you know Mr. Vance for his recent, extraordinary assistance with the KRPTHI group negotiation. What most of you don't know is that Mr. Vance is fluent in 9 languages and possesses an analytical capability that has proven to be a remarkable asset. Thorne scoffed audibly. With all due respect, CEO Reed, are we really basing serious business decisions on the observations of a janitorial staff member playing at being an analyst? Ms. Reed's eyes narrowed. Mr. Thorne, what Elias Vance has uncovered is no game, and he is no longer on janitorial staff. Mr. Vance, please proceed. Elias rose, his demeanor composed. He connected his laptop to the main screen. Ghosn was the hesitant man from the hallway. In his place stood a professional presenting irrefutable facts. Calmly and articulately, he walked the board through his findings. He presented spreadsheets where figures didn't add up, copies of contracts with suspicious clauses highlighted, and correspondence, some of it in its original German or Russian, which he translated flawlessly on the spot for the board members, that strongly suggested collusion between Thorne's key deputies and specific underperforming vendors. He detailed how the translation agency that fumbled the Hungarian deal was just one of several such entities receiving preferential treatment, despite high costs and poor service, all under Thorne's oversight. The evidence was damning, meticulously cross-referenced, and impossible to refute. Thorne's face went from red to a sickly pale. He started to bluster, to interrupt, to accuse Elias of misinterpreting data, of having a vendetta. This is outrageous! This upstart is fabricating these claims! He wouldn't understand the complexities of my department. But Elias didn't flinch. Mr. Thorne, he said, his voice even but carrying undeniable weight, the numbers speak for themselves. For example, this contract with Global Tech Translators, the one that provided Mr. Henderson, shows consistent overbilling by 15% compared to industry standards and their error rate on submitted work, which I checked against original source documents in 3 languages, was over 25%. Yet, their contract was renewed 3 times, each time with your personal sign-off, despite internal complaints from other departments. The board members were silent, their faces grim as they absorbed the presentation. The lead counsel and head of audit then briefly confirmed that a preliminary verification of Mr. Vance's findings indicated a high probability of significant, deliberate financial misconduct. The confrontation was decisive. Thorne's attempts to discredit Elias were swatted away by the sheer volume of evidence. By the end of the presentation, his arrogance had completely deflated, replaced by a sheen of desperate sweat. Ms. Reed delivered the verdict. Mr. Thorne, you and several of your senior managers are hereby suspended, effective immediately, pending a full external forensic audit and likely legal action. Your access to company property and systems is revoked. Security will escort you from the building. Thorne stared, aghast, then slumped in his chair, utterly defeated. The public disgrace was absolute. In the aftermath, the Kara Thai Group, upon being discreetly informed of Omnicorp's decisive action to root out internal corruption, with Elias masterfully handling the sensitive communication, finalized the $50 million deal. They were impressed by the company's commitment to integrity. Elias Vance was publicly vindicated and praised by Ms. Reed and the entire board. A few days later, Ms. Reed called him to her office once more. "Elias," she said, a warm smile on her face, "Omnicorp needs you. Not just for your languages, but for your integrity, your analytical mind, and your courage. I'm creating a new position, Director of Global Communications Integrity and Vendor Relations. It's yours if you want it." Elias, the man who once walked the halls invisibly, felt a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. He accepted. His first major initiative was to completely overhaul Omnicorp's international vendor vetting process and internal translation services, establishing clear ethical guidelines and performance metrics, ensuring that talent and integrity were valued above cronyism. The entire office, stunned by the swift downfall of a powerful executive and the equally swift rise of the former janitor, began to see things, and people, differently. A new culture, one that looked beyond titles and acknowledged the potential in every individual, started to tentatively blossom. Elias Vance had not just found his voice, he had helped Omnicorp find its conscience. And so, Elias Vance's journey, from the overlooked shadows of Omnicorp's hallways to a pivotal role in shaping its global voice, serves as a powerful reminder that extraordinary talent can be found in the most unexpected places, and integrity will always shine through. If this story of resilience, hidden potential, and the fight for justice stirred something in you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring narratives about people who turned adversity into triumph. What was the most impactful moment for you?